All right, let's start something then. Welcome. This is Uncut Nonsense, the show where, let's be honest, this might be the first and last time you're hearing this. I am your host, Doc Klugman, and we are about to start a journey together. And the journey, of course, starts with one of the most magical times of the year, football season. We're a few days out from football season. And to celebrate, we'll be going over every single team by division, and we're going to be taking a look at their season from last year and the hopes and expectations that we're going to be seeing for them in this coming year. A lot has changed around the NFL, and let's get right into it. So we'll start off this episode first with the NFC North Division. The North Division obviously consisting of the Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions. One of the more powerhouse divisions last year, having three of the teams make it, and the fourth one, the Chicago Bears, the cellar dwellers in the division, actually seem to make a little bit more strides, especially with their rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams. But first, we'll start, of course, with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers last year finished at an impressive record of 11-6. That was good enough for third in the NFC North. They were pretty even across the board at home. Went 6-3 away. Went 5-3. They had their losses that I feel really should not have happened. However, as we've seen in some sort of Packer fashion, sometimes some of the games that seemed a little bit more easier for them ended up slipping through the cracks. Big story, of course, this coming year was their quarterback, Love, and see what he was able to do this year. Got that nice, shiny new contract that what people were hoping would be a positive step in the right direction for Green Bay, especially with the departure of Aaron Rodgers going to the New York Jets. Offensively, as you can see, points per game finished eighth in the league. The rushing attack, led by Jacobs, ended up doing very, very well as they were top five. And then the pass game with Love finished with 12th overall. Overall, not bad for the offense. It really was a solid offense, which I really could appreciate and really could enjoy watching. Love was pretty good. Obviously, wants to take that next step because they want to see what he's able to do with the new money that they ended up getting. I get that. I understand that. Defensively, not bad as well. In fact, better than the offense. The defensive passing wise, it finished with 13th in the league, still in the upper half of the league. Obviously, the defensive rush, much better. It was very strong with the front that they had on the defensive line. The trenches at seventh, and then points per game finished at six, just outside of top five. So defense, that turned out to be the thing that was better. And it really made a difference with that. And that obviously also shows you as we lead into really the big talk of the town that had hit the NFL a few days prior is the departure of Micah Parsons from the Cowboys trading over to the Green Bay Packers. Big jaw dropper, for the entire offseason. Cowboys and Micah's agent were talking the whole time. Jerry Jones was sticking his fingers in there, trying to get there and try to get to a deal ahead of time without the agent's involvement. That didn't work. Mike wanted to obviously use his agent because you pay the money, you might as well use your agent. I know it's a crazy notion. I know that's crazy because that's not what Jerry Jones wants. And regardless, though, they could not reach something. They did it with the Packers. Packers give up two first-round draft picks. Now this is when it gets a little interesting. Obviously, there was involving with players, but the thing that I look at with this trade with Parsons is that the Packers are getting a lot right now. They have a very above average offense, a very above average defense. The big step with that, though, is your trade of losing a first rounder next draft in 2026 and losing a first round draft pick in 2027. Future wise, that is a big, steep thing and a tough pill to swallow. And to be fair, I like the trade, but and I'll talk about this more when we talk about the NFC East and we bring up the Cowboys, of course. But the big thing about that is that's something that I think the Cowboys worked out better for. I think the trade benefited them a lot more than it did with the Packers. As much as the Cowboys don't want to admit it, or at least within their own office, including Jerry Jones, the owner slash GM, is that this was not going to be a year for them where they were going to make the biggest steps ever. This was not a Super Bowl team. Packers put themselves in a lot better situation, not just for their division this year, but for the entire NFC conference as a whole. The addition of Michael Parsons, although I do like Michael Parsons, he's a good athletic player, is known more so as a pass rusher, not as much a run stopper, because he obviously plays at the end of the defensive line. It's a good addition. It really is. Do I think Michael Parsons is the greatest player ever on the defensive front? I don't. I really don't. Is he good enough to make the Packers defense even better? Absolutely. You saw on the defensive stats that they have 13th. That's above average, of course, in the middle of the league, but overall, it's not the greatest in the world. I anticipate the defensive pass game will get better because now you have help rushing the quarterback every single time. We'll go over the turnover, the takeaways for the Packers in that defense. They ended up getting 31 takeaways. That's one of the top ones for the entire league this year. Obviously, the turnover differential ended up being a 12 because they kept the ball a little bit somewhat safer this year. Not the worst in the world, but definitely not the best. And I really do think that this can really make a good difference for the Packers defense. That's going to be the name of the game here with this. Jordan Love is going to be able to do whatever he's able to. Obviously, he has a lot of help around him. He's looking to gain more help around that as the season goes on. Hopefully, with knock on wood injuries and stuff like that does not play a big factor into them. But I do think that there is a good potential chance that the Packers will make a run at this division. They finished third last year, I think mostly because obviously the Lions were so good and the Vikings were such a stunner team last year with what they were cooking up with Sam Darnold. But I think the Packers definitely remember they were no slouches. They still made it to the playoffs. They exit first round bye. They got the seventh seed and the bad luck of the draw stacked them up against what would ultimately be the Super Bowl winning champion Eagles. And I think they just simply ran out of gas last year. That was one of the biggest things. Now, yes, were they better than the Eagles? No, it was not just running out of gas. I understand that. However, I think a good part of it was what we needed another year to develop, and that's just happened to be how our season ended. That's just how the cookie crumbled. So be it. Obviously, looking at their schedule this year, you have your regular divisional opponents, and then at home, you're playing teams like Washington, very good team, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Cincinnati. They have a tough home schedule. Obviously, it's beneficial because it will be played at Lambeau. However, besides Carolina and maybe Chicago, a lot of these games are going to be tough while they're playing at home. Again, they have the advantage of being at home in those scenarios, but it's still going to be a rough one. On the road, it's a lot easier. They play the Giants, they play Arizona. Denver might be a little bit of a struggle, but then they play Cleveland, which end up should be somewhat of a cakewalk, especially how Cleveland's been turning out this year. And then you obviously had Dallas, and that will be a nice little interesting matchup to see later on in the season when Micah has to play against his whole team. I'm sure there'll be a lot of interesting things that are going on, and honestly, I'm sure for Micah's sake, he's happy that it's not being played. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's upset that it's being played in Dallas, where he can definitely hear all of the boos if there will be some of that. Overall, though, I like what the Packers have done this offseason. I really like their chances. I think it's a lot better the fact that they get Michael Parsons there to help, shape up that defense a little bit more. The defensive rush game is doing pretty good. Pass game obviously is doing should be doing better with this. I really think they have that opportunity to go further, even in the playoffs, assuming that they do end up getting there. Next up, of course, we have the Chicago Bears. Bears were the cellar dwellers last year, 5-12 finish. They were 4-5 at home and just abysmal on the road, only getting one road win, and they ended up going 1-7. Remember, the NFC teams last year did have 9 home games, and the way the NFL does it now, because it's an odd number, they'll swap. This year, it'll be 9 road games for all the NFC teams, and the AFC teams will get their 9 home games. Then, obviously, like I said, it swaps back and forth consistently. So, with that being said, defense, again, it wasn't too bad. Points per game, they ended up being 13th. However, that number's a little skewed. Remember, Chicago Bears finished 2 years ago in last place. They finished, they played last year against other last place teams. They played against the Commanders, who were still getting their footing together. They played against Carolina, who offensively is really not too shaping up to be the best. They played against a lot of weaker offensive opponents, so again, if they're not scoring too much points, how much can you really put it fully on the defense doing their job, and just the fact that they might have gotten some opportunities, taking advantage of some kind of subpar offenses that they were playing against. Defensive rush, absolutely abysmal. They could not stop a nosebleed, 28th in the league. And then defensive pass game was actually far better at 16. So about maybe average or so for that overall, if you sum it up with the whole league. Offense was just atrocious. You had Caleb Williams. Everybody was going off about this guy. I don't see it, or at least I did not see it of why people would do this going into his first season. There were talks about people saying that Caleb Williams was gonna be already getting his bust ready at the Hall of Fame. Get off with that. Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous on why people would even entertain that thought. He is not the worst quarterback ever. He isn't. He's got a little bit of mobility with them. Obviously, he needs to get his IQ up going. With the NFL IQ. I think the big thing that crippled him last year was the fact that he was holding onto the ball way too long. If he had enough protection where he was not getting hit or getting sacked, he would hang on to that ball as long as he could. There's some times where he's hanging on to the ball for 6, 7 seconds in the pocket. At that point, even if you're not getting hit by a defensive lineman, you need to make a decision. Those receivers are not going to stay open the entire time. Come on. Like, that's the whole thing about the IQ thing they need to work better on. Offensive points per game, 28th. Again, not really doing good at all. The rush game was 25th, and the pass game, second to last on the pass game at 31st. It was just, it was a nightmare. And I think he came in a little bit maybe too big for his britches this first game. And I think honestly, it's a good humbling moment, and nothing against Caleb. I really don't have a problem with the guy, but I think a humbling moment is something that a big superstar rookie needs to do. Everybody was talking about him. Everybody wanted to see what he was all about. And it just shows for yourself that it was subpar performance. Again, nothing wrong with that. It's a rookie. Not every rookie is going to be like CJ Stroud 2 years ago or Jaden Daniels last year. It happens. There's a lot of these early quarterbacks now these days in the draft. They get drafted early. Remember, they get drafted early, but they're put on a team that is not doing too good at the point. That's the whole reason of getting drafted high, is that you're going to more than likely be stuck on a bad team. And because of that, they got no other option. They send that poor rookie quarterback out there most of the time, and then one of two things happen. Either they actually might actually do pretty good, and good on them. Obviously, they adjusted well, or they fall flat footed, or even that little secret third option that nobody wants to entertain is that they could even end up getting themselves hurt, which is something that obviously nobody wants. Going into this season, home and the road, it's pretty interesting. It's a little bit lighter than normal just because, again, they finished in last place. At home, you got teams like the Giants and the Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns and the Saints. Their home schedule is honestly really easy outside of their own division. And I think the division is the one that's going to give them the problems out there in Chicago. But I think the rest of the time at home, they should at least be able to put somewhat of a fighting chance against some of these teams, maybe even scratch together a couple wins. As for the road, you have teams like like Vegas, and then that might be one of the easier ones you get. The road is brutal for them. Washington, Philly, Cincy, Baltimore, even San Francisco. You don't know about San Francisco yet just because of the issues that they had last year with injuries. And we'll get to that when we talk about the NFC West. But the issues with injuries is something that truly crippled San Francisco last year. And I really think that is the reason why they finished dead last, or at least one of the reasons why they finished dead last in the division. So I really think that that might be a little skewed. I honestly don't know what to think of San Francisco at the moment, but it could be a tough matchup. It could be a matchup that might not even be that hard. And maybe Chicago can find another win there. Obviously, it'll be in San Francisco, so it'll be a little bit more trickier. Going on the road is always a little bit tricky. But again, San Francisco is a little bit of a mixed bag going into this season. So overall, I think the big thing is second year for Caleb Williams. You got to give him some time. You got to be able to let him adjust to what's happening. And I think that right there is going to be able to tell. And that consistency the coaching staff for Chicago and the coordinators and everything under the sun, above obviously the players on the field, every single year they change out that coaching staff like how I change my underwear daily. It's so consistent. There's no consistency though for the players. Caleb Williams already is not playing with the same coach that he started with in Chicago, and I believe some of the coordinators as well. That's not good because everybody, although has a different or might have similar mindsets, they're all slightly different. So they're all going to teach this young guy new stuff. And because of that, I don't see it helping. I only see it hurting. And this year is all about getting consistency and getting him in the right direction because he needs to be the star player in this one. The offense was atrocious last year. They need to get better on that. Of course, defense, they can shape up as well. I do think that there is more potential with the defense to be able to do that. They did have 24 takeaways last year, but I think the offense is really the big thing that needs to propel them to getting more than 5 wins this coming year. After that, you got Detroit. Detroit Lions, first last year, 15-2, just incredible. Only team that actually finished perfect, or I should say, that finished undefeated on the road at 8-0. And at home, they did really good as well, 7-2. They were just incredible. The defense was lights out. Besides, obviously, the passing game. Um, Seventh overall points per game, top five in the defensive rush. The passing was the problem. No, it was 30th. They need more help in that secondary. That's the problem that really lies within the Detroit Lions is getting more help out there with the safeties, the cornerbacks, even some of those linebackers to be able to cover more than just protecting against the rush game of these opponents that they're going to face. Offensively, can't get much better than that. Points per game first. Offensive passing was incredible at second, and then the offensive rush game was sixth. So even the offensive rushing game, even though that was, I guess you could say, the worst part of their offense, it really was no Achilles heel for them. That's for sure. And it just goes to show you how many strides that they ended up making in the positive for the Detroit Lions, just because this was a team that was a joke in the NFL for even decades. The- Not too long ago, over a decade ago, they became the first team to go 0-16 in a regular season. They were a laughingstock. Fans had bags over their heads. They didn't even want to be seen at the stadium. It was something that was just so humiliating in Detroit, and that was in Detroit. You can't get away from that. But it looks like they're finally heading in the right direction. And I like what I see. I really do. I think they can definitely keep that firepower going. The big difference that I did see that I think was a big concern, though, last year was the fact that they had no depth. They had those guys out there. They did stay relatively healthy throughout the year. Obviously, they weren't crippled with injuries like San Francisco. However, they weren't as healthy as a horse, or in this case, I guess, healthy as a lion for their team. Every team gets banged up. That's a fact. However, you need more of a depth chart because if you don't have that depth chart, then all of a sudden your first guy goes down. You need a backup to at least be able to get by. Like any position that you have, you need a solid backup. Obviously, more backups in other positions are more critical than others. However, if you have almost no backups in a good chunk of your entire roster, then you're rolling the dice to making sure that most of your team stays healthy every single game throughout the entire year. That is a tall order to place for this NFL and how it is this day. I mean, injuries are just a part of the game. Unfortunately, they are, though. And that's something that needs to be looked into, and I hope it is addressed as we go through this season. Looking ahead of their schedule, not too shabby. They do play harder teams, of course, because they finished in first place last year. They play at home against Tampa Bay. They also got the Giants in Dallas, which should be a little bit easier, and Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I'm not so concerned as much about their home schedule, except for their divisional opponents and maybe Tampa Bay. On the road, though, is where it gets tricky. They'll play the Rams. Rams really finished strong last year. I want to see what the Rams do again this year, as well as Baltimore, Cincy, Washington, Philly, Kansas City. The road is tough, and to have to play all of these at the other opponent's house, it's going to be a tough one for the Lions. It really will be. This will be the true test on if they're able to make that next step. Now, I'm not anticipating that they're going to be going 15-2 this year. That was incredible. I still think this is a team, though, that can win 12 games and above. I really do. Like, I think they have the firepower to do it. I think they can easily go on the road and beat some of these other teams that they're playing against. So I do have faith that the Lions will be able to still put something together and make it a winning formula. Now, in regards to where in the division they will, I mean that depends. The NFC North is going to be a very tough division again because you are have a stacked team. This isn't like the AFC South or the NFC South or any of those where you kind of know what's going to happen, or even the AFC East. You know what's going to happen really, or you can take some wild guesses and you probably won't be too far off. But the Lions, I like where they're at. I really do have strong feelings that they're going to be able to do something special again this year. The only question is, are they going to be able to finish? This was the team that got the first round bye last year, and they ended up getting upset at home, like after having a break, 1 week off bye, and they lost to Washington. So I want to see if they're actually able to finish. Finally, you have the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were interesting last year. You bring in Sam Darnold. People did not know what to expect. He has the combination with TJ Hawkinson, a tight end, uh, somewhat okay protection on the offensive line, and then they get shown up in the wild card round of the playoffs, and then obviously Justin Jefferson, is a machine, and they ended up finishing the regular season second place in the division, 14-3. It came down to the final game where they lost to Detroit, and that's what ended up, giving them the wild card spot. 14-win team gets a wild card spot. NFL's doing something wrong with that. I digress, though. At home, 8-1. Only home game they lost was against the Lions, and then away was 6-2 to finish off the regular season. Offensively, they did pretty good. Ninth in points per game. The rushing attack was below average at 19, but the passing sixth. Very, very impressive by the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold. Really showing off that he might actually have something in the tank when it comes to it. Defensively, points per game, very good. Remember, they did play some weaker opponents though because they finished up third in 2 years ago. So they did play a few weaker opponents. Again, a little bit of an asterisk next to that, but regardless, still finished up fifth. Great on defensive rushing. Finished second in the league. Passing was horrible. 28th. That's not getting it done. It's what crippled them 2 years ago, and the turnovers, I should mention as well. Turnovers were good this time. The turnover differential was obviously positive 12, which is great. They had way more takeaways on the defensive side than they did actually giving the ball away, which is a positive from 2 years ago. The thing that didn't change 2 years ago was the fact that the defensive pass game was still atrocious. So, with that being said, that's what needs to fix. They need that secondary fix. 2 years ago, it crippled them to the very end where they ended up losing to the Giants in Minnesota in the wild card weekend. This one, again, except you can blame the offensive line for basically letting everybody on the defensive front for the Los Angeles Rams come through and sack Sam Darnold. And it's another heartbreaker for Minnesota. And I really need to see something different from Minnesota. Maybe we'll see it with JJ McCarthy. He missed out last year because of the injuries, the injury that got him, well before the regular season even started. We'll see what this does now for him this time. Looking at their schedule here at home, Atlanta, Philly, Washington, Cincinnati, Baltimore. Tough, tough home schedule. But I mean, again, at least you have the advantage of being at home, though, so you might have that little sort of edge with having the crowd behind you. On the road, you play in Dallas, which could be a little bit tough. You play against the Giants at home. You're going to play in Cleveland. You're going to play in Seattle. Again, Seattle's a mixed bag. You never know. You'll play also in LA versus the Chargers. It's okay. Nobody shows up to Charger games anyway. So you basically got an additional home game. Congratulations, Minnesota. And I just feel that they have the potentially with JJ McCarthy under the helm now. No more Sam Darnold. He's obviously out to Seattle. We'll see what he does in Seattle. But let's see what he does. And this could be a bust year for them. It really could, but you got to be patient. You got to be patient with the young guy. And who knows? Maybe you can get something together. I'm not anticipating a whole lot with the Vikings, but I am curious what's going to happen. As for like a prediction on what they're going to do, I really don't. Best I can do is put them in the middle of the field. They're not going to be a 14-win team this year. They're not. But I don't see it I mean, I don't see it being possible that they would flatten out and get only 4 wins. Like, I do think that there's some margin of wiggle room where they can be a 500 team, give or take a couple games. So I'm not ruling out anything, but at the same time, I am a little bit on the fence about what they could possibly do. With that being said, we have the ranking time for the NFC North. This is a little bit of a tough one, and not so much for the bottom or the middle of it. It's basically just tough for the top half. Bears, they're going to finish last. I believe in Caleb, but I don't believe what the rest of the team around him is going to be able to help him or that he's going to be able to help them enough. I just don't see them as a fully developed team yet. Even with a weaker roster, I see them still finishing fourth. I could maybe move them up to third, but my final prediction will be fourth for them. Vikings will slip into third. I think they're just going to get over enough to be kind of in the middle ground at around 500. But I can't give them anything more or less. I can easily see the Bears and the Vikings flopping. Vikings might be in fourth. Bears might do enough to be able to get third place if Caleb is able to make positive strides for the team. And obviously, they improve better when playing on the road. As for first and second, I would give the Lions first place before the Michael Parsons trade, but I might go with the Packers. I think the Lions need to prove that they have a better depth chart. I think the Packers have enough to make their already good defense even better with Michael Parsons. He ain't no superstar. He's not going to obviously make it to be where he's carrying everybody on defense. However, his addition is still going to be a positive presence, or at least for Packers fans, I hope it'll be a positive presence. You've given up 2 first-round draft picks for the guy. He better be a positive presence. I should say that. So I'll make the Lions as a wild card team easily in second place in the NFC North, and then I'll have the Packers winning the NFC North in this one. Obviously, it's a little bit more flipped around. It's possible that it could be either way. However, with Parsons, I do think that might give the Packers a little bit more of an advantage. I do think with the easier schedule being that they did finish in third, it will definitely help them stack up the wins compared to the Lions, who got to face a lot of tough teams, especially on the road. But who knows? Lions could shock me again. But that's going to basically do it for this one. We'll be going through the next division in the next video, and we'll be taking a look at how they stack up with those teams. We'll be looking at the NFC East. Thank you very much for joining me. Again, my name is Doc Klugman. If you guys like what you hear, please subscribe and please give me some comments. Let's see what's going on. We'll see what you guys think as well. I love a good conversation to see what other people think on the subject of just football in general, especially all you fans out there for your teams in the NFC North. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys on the next one.